as you're designing your business, you're thinking about what is the audacious goal that I could go after? What is the impact that I could have that doesn't require more time from me or necessarily dilute the service for the end user?
Welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. And I'm your host, Paul Sweeney. And today we're going to delve back into a topic that's been discussed in a couple of different ways on the podcast before, but it's something that is becoming more and more, topical, more and more relevant, particularly when we look at things like labor shortages and availability of employees and retention of employees, because that's a big thing. We've heard all this talk about quiet quitting. We've heard all the talk about the great resignation. We've heard in business owners everywhere saying they can't get good staff. But are we looking in the wrong place? And are we as employers and business owners going about this the wrong way? Perhaps we need to have another way of looking at this, and we need to redesign our businesses, or at least redesign our approach to how we engage employees. And what we're going to talk about today is, in particular, we're going to be talking about designing a workplace where, to coin a phrase, we create a position of doing work that's worth it. And that's something that seems to be attracting people to businesses, to cultures, to new roles, more so than just the paid remuneration. So work that's worth it, how we can create a purpose-driven workplace in our business to inspire our employees, drive positive change, and just make work more loving, interesting and fun for everyone. So as always, we've got in store for you the expert to help us unpack this topic and delve into it and give us some great tips on how we can actually address the situation of approaching Gen Z, particularly, who are looking for a lot more purpose with their work environments. So joining us today is Georgie Ento. Georgie is a thought leader, seasoned entrepreneur, dedicated for advocating for impactful careers. She's a distinguished alumni of UC Berkeley and Harvard Business School, got a career spanning multiple continents, including Australia. So we had a little chat about that before. So great to see that she knows where we are and the Australian way of life. She believes capitalism is at a tipping point and that businesses must evolve to demonstrate real positive impact. And that's something we've been hearing a lot of through our discussions recently, and hearing a lot, I guess, in the social media from what employees or potential employees are wanting from our businesses. So, we're fortunate. Georgie has just published or recently published her book, capturing a lot of these ideas that we're going to sort of briefly touch on today. The title of the book is Work That's Worth It. It's already a US Today bestseller. Some good content there, and I encourage you to get your hands on that at the end. So wait till the end of the podcast before you go and look up where to buy a copy of Work That's Worth It, and we'll put links to that in the show notes. But look, let's not waste any more time. Georgie, welcome to the Business Behind Your Business.
Yeah, what a lovely introduction. I am so excited to talk all things impact, all things Gen Z, and anything in between.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. I'm excited about this topic because I must confess, as an employer, I have employed Gen Z, and to be honest, it's been something that hasn't gone smoothly. I've missed some things in that employment opportunity, in that onboarding situation. As a parent of Gen Z, I'm not going to call them kids anymore because they won't like me calling them kids. But I'm just trying to understand what they're looking for and how they are approaching, I guess, who they go and work for, what type of career they're after. It's a struggle.
Yeah. Well, Gen Z or Gen Z, as I say, are over 25% of the workforce now. So it's something that we need to take seriously. I think every generation that passes the baton to the next generation has a reason to complain about the new generation. And I think that's totally normal, and that's what's happening now. And I can promise you that there are some amazing Gen Zs out there that are willing to work hard, interested in working on a team and collaborating, and really ambitious. So I hope that I can change your mind on that generation and give them or give you the right tools to motivate that younger generation.
Yeah, look, it certainly is possible, and we know that there are businesses out there and business owners who have really they've really nailed this concept, and they've got some great thriving teams of Gen Z or Gen Z. Think back to Mike Dunlop when we interviewed him. Now, Mike is in his 70s, and the majority of his team are actually Gen Z. So it's an interesting concept of how we can manage that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, well, first, the book that I wrote called Work That's Worth It is really geared towards Gen Z and helps them build a career that is focused on impact and income. But one of the things you'll find with this generation is impact is not negotiable. So just like millennials changed mental health for the workforce, this generation, and I applaud them and I'm so excited, are going to change how we approach work and how we positively impact the planet and humanity.
Mm, absolutely. Look, before we sort of delve into this in a bit more detail, what are we talking about when we mean having a positive impact? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, Jane Goodall says every day you either are having a positive or negative impact on the planet, and you get to choose what that impact is. And so in our businesses is exactly the same. Like we could use business as a force for good, or it's not, and that is something that we get to assess. And but I think when it comes to what the impact is, it's very unique and individual. So everybody has different reasons for motivation, and businesses can have different missions, and so can individuals have their own personal mission that ideally aligns with the business mission. And so what the impact is depends on what your the problem is that you want to solve in the world and where you want to contribute. What do you want to be known for?
Mm, yeah. So some businesses, when they start, when the business owner comes up with the concept or the idea for their business, it's very much got I guess, a goal of changing something, having some dynamic impact or social impact or environmental impact. But that's not always the case with a business. You might have, I guess you call a bread and butter type business. Maybe it's a professional services, but you still want to have an impact in a certain way. How do we sort of manage that approach?
Yeah, I I personally believe every business should have a mission that it is sort of its North Star, what it is really working towards. Why is it in business? And it's beyond just the transaction. So if you are a business providing a certain product to, let's say, women, it's more than just providing that transaction to sell to the woman. What is it that you're hoping that they do better, that makes their life better? And I will give you an example. There was a company that produced little education tutorials for the entry level workers in mostly Hispanic entry level workers in the US, and was helping them level up to get to the next level in their career for the company. And they were struggling with overproducing content and not really seeing results. And it was because they were doing sort of these transactional videos and just producing more and more content. They didn't have a North Star or something that they were working towards. And they, after doing some deep dive work, they realized that actually their deeper goal was to improve the income of these people. Like, what would actually improve the income? And that gave a filter for the types of video content that they created. And then all of a sudden there was tons of traction, and also their customers were referring many other people. So just having a personal mission can actually really strengthen your business and give it purpose and meaning for your customer and for your employees.
Okay. So you talked about I guess the videos in there. So I'm guessing that communication to not just your team, but to your, I guess, your customers is also critical in this process.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of it as alignment, and it's a way of showing up at work just the same person you are at home as in work, because it's something that you really care for and believe in. I think I focus on impact and income, so I don't believe that it is realistic to ask people just to have jobs that do good. I believe that we all have lives that we need to live and expenses to pay and even vacations to go on and ways to make sure that we are not burning out. And so I believe that our job should be compensate us well for work. And so my real corner of the world is where can you have both and why it's important to have both. And the younger generation in particular really insist on having both.
Because I know a lot of business owners have used let's say it's an excuse, but they've used the argument that I can't support some other kind of social impact, or I can't have that kind of impact with my business until I get it up and running and I'm profitable. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of business owners start from the outset with that whole idea of having an impact beyond the financial statements, beyond the profit line. And they tend to thrive. So is there something in that?
Yeah. I mean, I would, if I were advising an entrepreneur, I would ask them to really think about the question is, what is the problem that they're solving? And is it worth their valuable time? Because so many of us start businesses or have ideas for businesses that are not really something that we would say we want to be known for. Like at the end of your life, when someone reads, the statement in your funeral, what is it that you want them to say? And it's not that you were a master engineer or started a business contracting work software to small to medium-sized businesses. What is it that you contributed beyond that? What is it that is important to you, and what is it that you care about? And how can you wrap your business around that? The average career is 90,000 hours. That's a huge amount of time. That's about as much time as we're sleeping. And so if you have business owners that are not thinking about it, I would say that is normal, and that's how we've been educated in today's world. We haven't been asked the questions about what do we care about very often. We're asked, who do you want to be? What do you want to do? You go to college, what are you studying? After college, what are you going to do with that? And we're expecting answers like, I'm an engineer, I'm a marketer, I work in operations and finance. But we don't expect people to say, I support women. I want to turn around the climate crisis. I want to help refugees. We're not asking people what they care about and where they would like to contribute. So it's a normal process in today's world to not have that really clear and to have that built into what we're doing. But that will definitely have to change. I mean, we can see where our planet is going, and business is the easiest use of a force for good. Politics is difficult. Politicians are built on cycles of election, and often the long-term goals of building a long-term benefit for, let's say, climate may affect your short-term political aspirations. But businesses can pivot quickly, and they can influence the world that we live in. And so I really believe that businesses could and should be used as a force for good.
I'm just wondering if it's a generational thing where we're asking those wrong questions, because I grew up, and look, I'm over 50, so I'll confess that. And I know I'm not alone, because I guess, particularly in Australia, over 50% of businesses are owned by males over the age of 50. So we've got this large skew to a generation that grew up with, it was about what do you want to be when you grow up, not what impact do you want to have when you grow up. The identity came from which role are you going to do, and that your whole sense of achievement was built up in the role and the status that you had. Whereas the questions that, if I ask that question to my children or my young employees, they're going to come up with a different answer. They're going to say, well, why are you trying to pigeonhole me into a particular role? That's not what I want to do. I'm thinking broader than that.
Yeah, I do. I think you're absolutely right. And that is why young people do want to understand what the mission of the company is, and it needs to be compelling. And so the reason I call the book Work That's Worth It is those are the words you hear from young people. Is it worth it? Is it worth my time? Is it worth my energy? And they get a job offer, and we older folks might think, all right, they should just be grateful to get the job offer and have a permanent job. But they're thinking, is it worth it? And I think what has what is worth it today is different than what would have been worth it when you and I started our careers.
Yeah, absolutely. And would it be fair to say that if I was Gen Z looking at two identical roles, or let's say two roles, similar kinds of employers, but one had that impactful purpose, and the other one didn't, I would gravitate to the one with the impactful purpose. And what I'm thinking of here, particularly, and I can't remember the name of the company specifically that does it, but they're cosmetics, toiletries, etc. But one of the things they do from their profit is they actually provide kits for women who are victims of domestic violence, whereas the competitor doesn't do that. So I'm thinking maybe Gen Z would gravitate to that company that has that social purpose.
Yeah. And I would tell you, the more deeply that purpose is integrated into all the work that that company does, the more Gen Z will be likely to prefer to work there. They can tell pretty quickly when it's greenwashing, or it's something just nice on the side. And they'll ask some pretty deep questions, especially if they are have particular value to an organization and are more difficult to replace. So sometimes, I mean, AI is coming down fast and furious, but engineers in the past have, held companies to a higher standard and said, unless you are net zero, I am not going to take this job. And so I think what we are finding is this generation cares, and the pushback that they give us because they care is actually really valuable pushback for all of us to receive. So it may feel frustrating if you are the business owner, but it's work that actually will add a lot of value to your life and also to your employees to get them motivated. I mean, we talk about often burnout, and I'm sure that you have talked about burnout on your shows, and but so many employees that I talk to today are very disengaged with the work that they're doing and uninspired. It's really difficult to be inspired by work that has no larger purpose. But when you do have that, the mundane tasks become so much easier. And so in my book, I interviewed one of the first employees of the company Patagonia, and he said, 90% of your work is going to be boring. Like that's just the reality of the job. But what pushes you through that is having something that you really care about. And so when you think of designing impact, it really is a win for the business owner. It's a win for any of the workers, but it's also a win for the consumer. And I think that's what you're referring to with this other company is they're able to attract and hopefully retain talent because that's something people feel vested into the impact that it's having. But also the consumers are excited to buy from that company, and then they get the feedback, the workers get the feedback from the consumers or the people they're directly impacting with domestic abuse and helping them prevent that in whatever way they do. And so the feedback loop is really contagious, and that gives you energy. And we talked a little bit before the show about compensation, and I really believe compensation is anything that allows you to keep going for your 90,000 hours. So yes, it's pay, but I don't have the statistics in front of me, but a large portion of, like, they've checked of MBAs, and they say, would you take a less of a salary for a company with an impact you're aligned with? And I don't know what the percentage is, but it was significant. And people are willing to do so. Obviously, there'll be a point where they are not, but people are looking for work that feels aligned and that they feel energized by. And so it's a really wonderful way for a company to get their workforce excited and something that they can all feel aligned by and around without necessarily having to spend more.
Absolutely. As you're saying that, I'm thinking back to an accounting conference I went to a number of years back with the theme of the conference was purpose beyond profit. And there was a number of the speakers shared examples of long-term employees or employees where they were so disengaged, but as soon as the company started to move to having more of an impact, more of a social purpose, the engagement and I guess pride in turning up to work, um, you know, that just accelerated. Examples of people that saying like, there was one employee that reported saying, "I've been working here for over 20 years and I would not tell anybody about anything I did during the week. But since you've started, since you implemented this program, I'm proud. I talk to people. I'm proud to say I work here." Uh,
Yeah.
but that is a huge change.
It's so true. While researching and talking to people for my book, I interviewed a lot of my classmates from Harvard Business School, and it's amazing of how many of them have climbed the ambition ladder, which I have done in my past as well, and feel really empty at the top. And I heard things from I don't feel engaged with what I do. I don't like what I do. And the worst was I'm embarrassed of what I do. But once you get up that ladder and your income is high and your lifestyle depends on it, it's really hard to get off and then potentially compromise of how the impact piece comes in. It doesn't always have to compromise, but often it does. And so it was interesting for me of these people who are sort of the poster children of success, feeling trapped and unexcited, unmotivated by the work they do, but really not being able to step off the ladder at this stage.
Mm. Yeah, and look, we've had conversations on the podcast talking about the disengagement of employees. Often, your high performing, highly paid employees get to a point where they do become trapped. They're trapped because they've built a lifestyle depending on the salary, but they're not happy, and so they become disengaged and suddenly become your poor performing employees. But they're also highly paid poor performing employees. So it's a situation we want to avoid by designing our business with a purpose, to have that impact and create a great environment for our employees to work in where they are proud to turn up to work, and they get a lot of joy from not just the financial side of what the business is delivering, but the impact that it's having in the world.
Yeah, I mean, one of the companies I interview, I interview different role models in my book, and one of the entrepreneurs is started a company called Virta Health, which is based in the U.S. And his objective when I interviewed him was to reverse diabetes in 100 million people. And when I did the check, when I went back before I published the book and checked with him to make sure I had gotten everything right and hadn't signed off on it, he said, "Oh no, that's actually 1 billion people now, and it's reverse diabetes and obesity in 1 billion people." And as he does better in his business, he helps more people, but doing well and having impact, having impact and having income go hand in hand for him. The better he does, the more impact he has. The more impact he has, the better he does. And so that's sort of a best case scenario where the business is so aligned with all the right incentives. And this entrepreneur was really extraordinary. And often I meet people who really want to do good in the world, who really want to have an impact, and they don't think big enough. And one of the things that became apparent of talking to this particular CEO is, he said, it's the same amount of my time whether I'm serving 100 people in a particular diabetes clinic in the neighborhood, or I'm influencing an opportunity to help 1 billion people. It's the same. I still have the same job, and I'm just able to add a lot more zeros behind who I want to impact and design the business around that. So yes, impact is really important, but if we are wanting to solve some of the major problems in the world through business and use business as a force for good, also allowing yourself to think big and almost, when I was talking to him, I said, your goals are audaciously big. He said, yes, but guess what? That's what the press are interested in. So they write about it and people are interested in, investors. And so he's been able to do really well. And if he achieves 80% of that billion number, that's incredible. And so, I think sometimes another opportunity is really just making sure that as you're designing your business, you're thinking about what is the audacious goal that I could go after? What is the impact that I could have that doesn't require more time from me or necessarily dilute the service for the end user?
Mm. Yeah, look, I think just listening to you there, one of the excuses I hear from a lot of people is that they don't feel that they can do enough to make an impact. But you've just given us an example of how changing the goal from one level to the next doesn't require a lot more, I guess, time. It may be requires a different approach, but you can actually set those bigger goals from whichever position you're starting from.
Yeah, 100%. That is, it's definitely the case. So that, and then the other piece that I definitely noticed in the people that I interviewed is they had a really clear personal mission that if it's your business, you probably design your business around. But they were able to say things like, "I will reverse diabetes, by this date," or "I will end homelessness in my lifetime," or whatever it is. But they would able to say and declare what they wanted to achieve. And this is sort of the mountain that they're climbing in their career. So what that helps with is what to say yes to and what to say no to. It helps you prioritize. It also, again, it goes back to motivation. You know exactly what you're working towards. And so the mundane stuff, the difficult conversations, the more challenging work, you know why it's worthwhile. And so it just all becomes easier.
Mm, mm. That's great. Georgie, are there a couple of, if somebody wanted to get started, okay, and maybe they're not in a position to take big steps in this, but what are some easily achievable steps that a business owner could take to get started on this road?
Yeah. I mean, the book that I write is really for the individual and it's for young professionals. But if you translate that into a business owner, it's the same steps. So, understanding what the contribution is that you want to make is a really important step. And for somebody young starting out, I always say, like, even if it's just picking one word, and the same goes for a company. So if you don't have a personal mission or a mission for your company, what is one thing you're going to contribute towards positively? And so that could be women, that could be the environment, it could be a country, it could be Australia, whatever it is. But what is the one word that you can start deciding that you're going to contribute positively towards? And from there, you will become more involved in that topic and the right opportunity will surface. So I really understand what the contribution is. But the other piece is really understanding what your capabilities are, what are your strengths, what are the perspectives that you bring that give you the extraordinary advantage. And so again, the same thing for a company. What is your company better at than anybody else? And really leaning into it. And I often find that in the individual cases, we are accustomed to gearing up our weaknesses. And as somebody who is running a business, it is you're wearing many hats, so you are going to have many skills. But to understand where you're extraordinary and where you stand out and spend time leaning into those as much as possible really sets you apart. And that's what I found really consistent in the people that I interviewed for my book, is that they were very aware where they are strong. They could communicate it to others without feeling boastful. So they took ownership of their strengths, and which I call the capabilities in the book, but it's your advantages. And so those are probably the two places I would start. But the third area would be really understanding the compensation needs of your employees. And compensation is well beyond just the paycheck. It's what gets them motivated to show up to work. So it ties back to contribution, but it's also, do they need flexible hours? Would they like a lot more autonomy over the work that they're doing? One of the things, having talked about Gen Z, is they don't want to be told exactly how to do it. If you can motivate them on the why they're doing it, why it's worth it, why it's important, they really want to be able to use their brains, and they're incredibly resourceful as a generation, and they want to be able to come up with a plan of how to get there, at least to start. So yeah, those three areas I think would be really important.
Oh, absolutely. That's great advice. Um, Look, I'm excited. I'm going to be actually getting a copy of the book for my children, specifically, but I'll also be making sure that I read through it as well, because I think as an employee, you need to understand or take the time to understand who you're employing, and as you mentioned, Gen Z, uh, they're a huge full of talent, opportunity awaiting. We, as business owners, we need to engage them in the right way. So we need to understand them. So, Georgie, how do we get a hold of the book?
Yeah, anywhere you order online, the book is available. And so if you want to go to, the easiest way to find me is at workthat'sworthit.com. Information about the book is there. And also, I have more information at georgieandtoven.com, which I'm sure you'll have in the show notes because it's a little bit harder to spell. But yeah, anywhere there. And would love to hear from people and understand what is their personal mission and what they're really wanting to contribute in the world.
Fantastic. Yeah, as Georgie mentioned, we are going to share those links in the show notes, so you won't be able to miss them. So you'll be able to take a look at the show notes, but also on the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website, they'll be there for you to look at, as well as some more information about Georgie and the skills that she has that you could perhaps tap into for your business. Look, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us, Georgie, and thank you for your time and for also, I guess, capturing this concept and explaining it to us in such an easily digestible form, because I think you've really given us some structure and some tips on how we should perhaps revisit how we approach not just employing Gen Z, but employing our whole team, but also how we structure our business to be something that's got a purpose.
Yeah, well, that is music to my ears. Lovely to hear. And it was just a real pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thanks very much.